So it just gives you a sharper way to be able to understand the world and understand yourself, and allows you to intentionally be more. It is the instrument that allows us to be human and have better interactions and be better decision makers. You're activating your creativity brain, and your creativity brain is it's limitless. So you're going to be coming up with ideas that you haven't thought about before during this time. Happy, optimistic, goal-oriented, solution-oriented, hopeful, optimistic. You're smiling, you're exuding that energy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Feel Good Friday. Today, I'm joined by Shonté Jovan Taylor, all the way from Texas in the United States. Shonté, I'm at the moment I'm studying with Shonté. She's a professor and a neuroscientist. So maybe you'd just like to tell us a little bit about yourself first, Shonté.
Oh, absolutely, Paddy. Thank you for inviting me. Like Paddy said, my name is Shonté Jovan Taylor. I'm a neuroscientist and a success trainer. And I'm also the founder of the Optimind Institute. So what I do on the planet is basically empower everyday people, leaders, coaches, to be able to understand the most powerful part of themselves, their brain, so that they can intentionally move into their higher levels of their human potential and be able to have more management of their emotions so that they can feel more connected to the people they're around and just really be able to focus and have productivity and thrive in the world.
Great. Mm-hmm. If we were to sum up, what is neuroscience, and how important is it in the business world, Shonté?
Yeah, so let me go back in time a little bit. So I didn't always use neuroscience or brain science for the work that I do right now. So when I wanted to grow up, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. So I went and studied neuroscience in college. And neuroscience is essentially the study of the brain and the nervous system and how it controls our body, our thoughts, our decisions. And when I was studying neuroscience, over the course of 20 years and doing research, I basically learned to understand what goes wrong with the brain. So brain injuries, dementia, memory loss, stress, PTSD, all of the clinical and pathologies of the brain. So that's basically where I learned how to understand the brain, but it didn't really empower me. I didn't feel like I was really, showing up using this knowledge how I wanted to. I like to empower people about how their brain works. And I thought, the brain is fascinating. I'm like, what more can we do with this knowledge? So I decided not to go into the clinical realm. And what I saw when I started working in organizations, specifically like the government and like big pharma and the health education, I've been in all different types of realms, was the interaction between people, right? Like the leadership, management, supervisors, employees, it was all fascinating, the behavior between people and what inspired people, what motivated people, what caused people to lose focus and productivity, what made people go in the bathroom and cry, stuff like that. And I started noticing people would come to me with their issues and their hopes and their dreams. And I started to see the dynamics of the organizations and culture through the lens of what the brain was doing. Like when somebody was stressed, I could see that it was affecting their work and their focus and their attention. When I saw leaders who weren't caring about their employees, I saw the morale go down. So I started to understand the changes that were going on in the brain. So being able to understand more about the brain and how it works allows you to see more clearly how human behavior takes place, not just within you, but within other people as well. So it just gives you a sharper way to be able to understand the world, understand yourself, and allows you to intentionally be more, in a situation, to connect more, to really understand how what you do affects someone else, or how what someone else does affects the other person. So it just gives you a deeper understanding of who we are and how we interact as human beings.
Great.
So I know that was a long way to answer your question about what exactly is neuroscience. The study of the brain and the nervous system, but deeper than that, more relevant than that, it is the instrument that allows us to be human and have better interactions and be better decision makers in, everything that we do on this human journey.
Okay, so you mentioned decision makers there. That kind of leads me into my next question, Shonté. So
right.
At the moment, we have a lot of decisions being made. So how do we go about making decisions in the brain? What affects our decision making, and what tips would you have to help us make better decisions in business, I suppose?
Absolutely. So I like to use the analogy of the body, because everybody's familiar with the body. We dress it every day. We, take care of it. We wash it. So let me use that analogy. Let's say that you needed to run from a dog because you're jogging, and then there's just a loose dog and it's chasing after you, or you see a kid in the street, right? And the kid might get hit by a car. You want to run in the street and get that kid as soon as possible. Or maybe you trip and fall down the steps or in the road or something. Depending on how much in shape your body is, right? How you've been taking care of it over time, your muscle strength, your flexibility, your metabolism, and all of that will determine how fast you can dart out in that street and get that kid out the road safely, so you both will be safe. Or how fast you can run from that dog and get safely into your home. Or how you can land from that fall when you trip or fall down the stairs. It will determine how many bones you break. If you break bones, if you sprain your ankle or anything like that. So basically, how resilient and flexible your body is will determine the outcome of being in an emergency situation, a challenging situation physically, right? So you can think that same way about your brain. Depending on how resilient your brain is, depending on how you've been nurturing it, how you've been building it up. So we have about 80 to 100 billion brain cells called neurons. And depending upon how strong those neurons are and how many connections there are, and how you've been able to manage your stressors so it doesn't deteriorate your brain, things like that will determine how you can deal with a challenge, whether it's a small challenge or a big challenge, right? So we all have different thresholds that will either cause us to have more anxiety, stress, fear, all of that. So we're all at different stages in our brain levels. So some people intentionally know how to take care of their brains, like you, Paddy, because you learn how to take care, learn intentionally about the brain. But other people, they may get bits and pieces about how to take care of their brain. Some people are more intuitive on how to take care of their brains, and some people just don't think about it at all, really. So it's just kind of going through their day. The brain will work at any of those levels, right? So the more we understand about how our brain works, how to manage our emotions, how to make it more resilient, understand to intentionally take on human activities and behaviors to strengthen different parts of our brain will determine how well we're able to bounce back from challenges, how we are able to deal with challenges in the moment and make decisions. So there's a couple of ways the brain can make decisions. We can make decisions based off of fear and anxiety and worry and threat, or we can make decisions based off of our higher prefrontal cortex, or I like to call the CEO of the brain, the leader of the brain, which is the most modern part of the brain, right behind your eyeballs, the frontal lobes. And this is the most modern part of our brain. And this is also the part of the brain that separates us from other animals. You know, it allows us to be able to be self-aware. It allows us to have creativity and, you know, have people create the Sistine Chapel or, you know, the Statue of Liberty and music and all of that. So we're able to think on levels that other animals cannot, which makes us more advanced. But we don't know how to intentionally use it all the time. So we don't necessarily know how to activate consistently that part of the brain that will allow us to be able to thrive in challenging times. So I'm not trying to minimize like what's going on in the world. It's serious, right? A virus is going to do what it's going to do. Okay. So I also have a master's in biology. So I understand viruses. And viruses it's something that I'm very certain about, because viruses, they're going to act like viruses. They want to find a host that they can thrive in, right? So depending on how people have been taking care of their immune system will determine if that virus can thrive in their, you know, body. So it's all about resilience when it comes to how we show up, how resilient we are, and where we can base our decisions from. So if you've been taking care of your brain, if you've been doing the activities that have helped you to manage your emotions, you're probably making decisions based on logic, rationale. That doesn't mean you're minimizing anything. It doesn't mean you're not being cautious. You're just not making decisions based on fear. And when people make decisions based on fear, they are essentially taking blood flow from their higher part of the brain and doing very instinctive things like hoarding, right? Or being selfish, or spreading fear-based information. So you start doing things that are more along the side of our primitive selves, right? Our hunter-gatherer, caveman, cavewoman type thinking instead of modern times. Like when you are operating from here and you're making decisions from your higher brain, you're more empathetic, you're more compassionate, you're starting to be solution-oriented because now you're not focusing on the problem. So when your fear brain is activated, you're focusing on more of the problems and more problems. It's like a spiral, downward spiral, right? But if you're focusing on solutions, that means you're activating your creativity brain, and your creativity brain is it's limitless. So you're going to be coming up with ideas that you haven't thought about before during this time. You know, during these challenging times, a lot of our advancements actually as human beings have come out of these moments that have tested the human spirit, that has challenged us to reach higher, to go further in our thinking, to be solution oriented. And what I really think we are learning to do with each other as teams and with organizations and with our creativity is that we're working together even more. This virus is revealing that it's not just about you, that I'm responsible for how I show up in the world. I'm responsible for wearing a mask or isolating myself or taking the necessary precautions so that I don't affect vulnerable people. Okay, so it starts to become us versus just I. And that's where we're going in our human evolution is how can we get to more compassion and empathy and we versus individualism. And so we start making decisions based on we versus just I. Does that make sense, Paddy? Am I?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. It's and it's because I'm seeing that at the moment with our own team and work. There's a huge sense of we, which is great. And actually, that would bring me on to with teams. So we have these happy chemicals floating around in our bodies. And so what are these happy chemicals, and what can we do, as leaders to release them within ourselves and also to help release these within our teams?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. So leaders, they set the stage for the rest of the organization. They set the morale, they set the culture. So if you have leaders who are fear-based, right, or who are not concerned with their employees, or are stressed out and burnt out themselves, they're going to show up like that. Their energy, their tone, the words that they use will be more towards activating the fear brains of everybody, right? Which puts everybody in a state of fear. And when our brains are activated in fear, our body automatically starts acting like it's running from a bear. So you're going to get all the chemicals that are associated with running for your life, like stress hormone called cortisol, adrenaline. And so your body's in a state of stress, okay? And long term, that deteriorates the functioning of every organ in your body, including your brain, which affects your memory, your decision making, and how you interact with other people. You're no longer patient, you're irritated, snappy, all of that. So we know what that's like. I think everybody can identify with being in that state. So, of course, there's the other side of the spectrum where you're positive, you're joyful, you're happy, you're optimistic. Even me just saying that put me in another state, right? Joyful, happy, optimistic, right? Your energy is different. I sat up a little more. I'm smiling more, right? So when we are in that side of the spectrum, we are releasing important chemicals that allows our bodies to thrive and our brains to thrive. And so it kicks us out of that fear system, that threat system. And now we're able to access so much more of our brain power. So those chemicals include like dopamine, which is important for motivation and learning. Because if you're not motivated to learn or to go to work or to create, then you're not going to do that, right? We have endorphins like serotonin that'll help us to feel good because we do our best work. We're more creative when we feel good. And actually, when those chemicals are present, that also means that there is a blood flow to the higher part of our brain, to the right brain, the creative brain. And so we need these chemicals present so our brains can thrive and we can access more positive thoughts. There's even neuroscience behind optimism. So if we're optimistic about the future, that will release the endorphins to allow us to continue to thrive and to keep working and to still be creative. And being optimistic, I do need to say this. It doesn't mean that you're kind of like Pollyannish. I don't know if you watch Pollyanna in Ireland, but, it's about a little girl who always thought positive, and she came to the town and, just was always, she became the light of the town because they were all so negative, and she turned everybody's minds around to a happy town. So it's not, when you're optimistic, it's not about just being happy all the time or positive all the time, but it's just your way of being hopeful about the future, being part of the solution about the future, not wanting to spread fear, which can also go viral, right? You don't want to put that energy out there. So you are in turn affecting other people when you're optimistic. It just means you're able to reframe situations or see a silver lining or see the positive in the challenges, which allows your brain switches to say, okay, I can see that, this is more, I can see the positives, or that if we keep on this track, there's more of a possibility that we'll get out of this, right? Especially if I'm putting in the work and other people are putting in the work. And so your brain starts flipping on those switches of, endorphins and dopamine and curiosity and creativity. And it gets that cycle going versus we're all doomed. So many people are dying. I'm going to be out of work, all those things. So your brain automatically shuts off the solution finding mode, and the blood flow starts reversing to the lower parts of your brain. So it's very important for leaders to be optimistic during this time, because that will affect how you speak to other people, your choice of words, because words can activate the fear or the higher brain or the creativity. Words can be inspirational or words can be stressful. So it's very important of using words of optimism, of forward thinking, of telling people that it will be okay. But we all have to do our part, So leadership is very important during these times. And you really don't know how powerful of a leader you are until there's actually a challenging time. This is the time for leaders to step up and expand and be the light in people's darkness, right? Be the light in the cave of darkness where people are looking to be guided. People are really not leaders when everything is fine and dandy, right? Let's see what you're made of, not just the big challenges either, but also the smaller challenges. I do want to mention that we have these special neurons in our prefrontal cortex called mirror neurons. So essentially, mirror neurons are linked to our empathy, our compassion, and our ability to read others' emotions, okay, and their intentions. So if I'm smiling at Paddy right now, he has mirror neurons in his head that actually activates as if he is smiling. He really is smiling, but his brain lit up even before he smiled and activated as if he was smiling. So his brain was able to read that I'm in a happy mood, right? That I probably feel good. And so that actually helped him release what's called oxytocin, which is another chemical in the brain that's responsible for trust, right? For connection. And he probably had a little bit of serotonin released, right? Because when you smile, endorphins are released in your brain versus when you frown, you're depressing those feel-good chemicals in your brain. So we're also responsible as leaders and as people who work in organizations and teams on how we show up to our coworkers. Because if we're down in the dumps, your coworker will unconsciously activate their mirror neurons and get down in the dumps. So, but if you show up happy, optimistic, goal-oriented, solution-oriented, hopeful, optimistic, you're smiling, you're exuding that energy, they're picking up on that. Their mirror neurons activate that energy and reflect that energy. That's what mirrors do. It's a reflection. So it's very important that people understand that it is us. It is we, not just you. We are responsible for how other people show up in the world as well. We have some responsibility in that. And I think one of the silver linings of this virus is that it is helping us to connect and help each other out and be responsible for how we show up to each other and be responsible for each other.
Great. I have one more question for you, Shonté, before we finish up, because I don't want to take too much of your brain power. There's a saying, so we can manage our brains or let our brains manage us. What would be your top tips for me, for my customers, for my team in work on how to manage our brains instead of the opposite?
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 tips, okay? So the first tip I would say is to really assess where you are in your brain? Like, do you feel exhausted? Do you feel burnt out? Are you stressed? You feel like you have anxiety-like symptoms? Where are your emotions? Are you more on the side of feeling sad, fear, all of that? Once you really sit down and assess, what your predominant state is, rank it from 1 to 10. Am I on a level 10, with fear, anxiety, stress, threat? Or am I at a level 2, or 1? So that if you rate yourself, let's say at like a number 9, you need to do more work than someone who's at a level 2. Okay. So, you need to do more brain resilient work to manage your brain, to manage your emotions. It's just like going to exercise, right? And making sure that when you fall, you're flexible and strong. When you are exercising, trying to get fit, you don't just go to the gym once a month. You have to go, 3, 4, 5 times a week. You have to put good things into your body. You have to hydrate and it's every day. It's not just one day. 1 day out of the month you eat a salad and you're healthy. So you have to think that way about your brain. If you're more on the side of anxiety, stress, fear, exhaustion, burnout, you have to do more work every day to enhance your brain. So that's the first thing. Become aware of where you are on that scale. Okay. And I'm starting there. A lot of people expect me to go straight to what exactly to do with the brain. But if you don't have self-awareness, it's really hard to change your habits and your thinking. You have to really get honest about where you are in your emotional home. Is your emotional home fear and burnout and stress? Get real with yourself, because you won't change unless you get honest where you are on that spectrum. Tip 2 for you to build a more resilient brain and to manage your brain is to really filter what's coming into your brain feed. Okay. So you can choose to watch the news 10 hours a day, or you can just get the highlights. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong with watching the news. You should be watching the news because it's a way to stay informed, even when there's not challenges. That's just being a responsible adult, to watch some news to see what's going on in your community, your city, your country, the world. That we're adults, we're supposed to be informed, right? But there's a difference between watching 10 hours versus, 10 to 20 minutes. There's some people who wake up to the news and go to sleep with the news. And right now, all they're really sharing is the number of deaths and, how far we have to go, and there's no vaccine and, things of that nature. So even if you're not looking at it, your brain is still picking up on millions of bits of information per minute under your subconscious. Because our conscious brain, we do have, automatic brain activities that are happening, like the beating of our heart, and inflating and deflating of our lungs, making blood cells and all that stuff that we don't have to think about. So 90% of the human functioning goes under our unconscious, and we're still taking in information under that unconsciousness. Okay. So when you have negativity coming into your brain for 20 hours, maybe people aren't staying up for that long, 10, 12, 18 hours, your brain is still getting activated in that fear brain, anxiety. And you may not even know why you feel anxiety or stress, right? It's because you've been allowing negativity into your mind. It's been filtering in there, even when you haven't really been paying attention. So I want to invite everyone to filter what comes into your brain feed so that your brain is not activated in fear and threat and anxiety and all of that. Okay. And, put in more positive information, reading spirituality books or read biographies that inspire you. This is the time to really fill our cup up, fill our souls up, fill our spirits up, because the human spirit is very resilient if it's taken care of. Okay. And I do want to add just one more thing. The reason why it's very important to take on more positive than negative, and Paddy knows this now, is because your brain is naturally wired for 5 times more threats and fear than positive reward and pleasure. And this is because this was a survival mechanism for humans when we were hunter-gatherers. It was very important that we stayed alive and understood what the threats were so that we can live, right? But now we're in modern times, and we shouldn't be more fearful than more positive and successful. Okay, that's why you need more positive to start to rewire your brain for the positive, the successes, the solutions, the optimism, and all of that. And so the third tip would be to now do the human activities that strengthen the mind. So the exercise, which fuels the oxygen into your brain to create mental energy, so that you can stay out of that stress brain, because it takes energy to get out of that fear and threat brain, right? So you need as much energy as possible, and exercise helps to fuel your brain. It also helps to protect your brain cells. So it boosts your brain immune system. It boosts your body immune system. So these are the things that are in your control. When you meditate, it helps to reduce your level of fear and anxiety, right? So now you are empowering your brain to be more resilient, and the blood flow will go more to the powerful parts of your brain versus to defaulting to the fear and the anxiety. And that's the place you'll be operating from most of the time. So we know that in, just 5 minutes of meditation a day, it will strengthen the brain and deactivate that fear, anxiety brain along the day. I have a few more. Of course, get your sleep, because sleep is when you're going to do a lot of repair in your brain. Your brain is on all day long, so it doesn't have time to do the cleanup, right? To clear up the gunk and the trash. When you cook, you dump things in the trash. Well, you need to eventually dump the trash, right? Or when the janitors go into the buildings, they go at night versus when everybody's around because it's too busy, right? So that's the beauty of one of the beauties of the brain when you sleep, is that now you get to clear up the gunk between all your 100 billion brain cells, so you're crisp and clear the next day and sharp, and you can be focused and have attention. And it's easier to access your higher brain, because if you don't get enough sleep, then your brain is stressed because it has so much gunk in it. And then it's easier to default into fear and anxiety. And you're also less productive and aware. And that could be dangerous, for some people's industries. So you want to do the things that I think a lot of people have been putting off, which is getting enough sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, exercising, and doing that internal work, with their spirit, and meditating, and, reading really uplifting things. I hope that serves you. I hope that helps.
That's great, Shonté. Yeah, so thank you. Thanks a million for your time. Really appreciate it. Wish you, your family, stay safe and keep well. And I'm sure me and you will catch up. We'll catch up soon. So thanks a million. Really, really appreciate your
absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions, Paddy knows how to find me. I'm all over the internet, so I'll be happy to answer more questions as well.
Great. Thank you, Shonté.
Thank you.